Magandang araw sa lahat. Good day, everyone. Welcome to the Listening Tambayan. Okay, so this is already our episode 4. So, uulitin ko ulit. The Listening Tambayan, what is it? It is a gathering of practitioners and audience for collective listening. It is under the Listening Biennial 2023. It is a string of endeavors where listening is at the core as a relational capacity, a philosophical and political proposition, a creative practice, and a research framework, which, although initiated by individual scholars, artists, and curators, is global in scope. So today, again, we gather and hang out. So tambay mode on. So, ayan. This is the second edition of the Listening Biennial, which is happening from July 6 to August 8, 2023. This is curated by Luisa Santos, Gueli Morato, Raya Badran, and our very own Dayang Iraula. So let me just read the partners of this project. This event is co-presented by Alitaptap Artists Community, DZUP-UP CMC Department of Broadcast Communication, University Hotel UP Diliman, Multimedia University Faculty of Creative Media, Malaysia, Silpakorn University Faculty of Fine Arts, Thailand, Camoes Instituto, the Cooperação and the Lingua, Portugal, and Hamburg Board of Culture and Arts. This is also sponsored by University of the Philippines, Diliman, Office of the Chancellor, UPD College of Mass Communication, Goethe Institute, Philippines, Japan Foundation, Manila, and supported by Anima Art Space, BMLab, Drawing Room, and UP Computer Center. Yan. So just a recap on the past events, no? We already aired 3 episodes. Our third episode is Listening to Music with our guests from the Philippines, from Kuala Lumpur, and from Thailand. So we listen to different music, a recreation of spaces through music as derived from different palettes of musical expressions in rituals and of everyday sounds, pushing forth the boundaries of music composition. So from that, we move on to today's episode 4, Listening to a Record. So for today's episode, we have here with us at the UPCMC Auditorium, members of the DOT ASMR project, Howie, Uyking, and Erwin, Romulo, and then Dr. Robin Rivera, and online, joined by John Kannenberg from Museum of Portable Sound, Portsmouth. Yan. So, hi, Doc D! Andiyan pala si Doc D! Hello! Yan. So, before we start, just a few reminders. Please observe the following. So, try to keep your gadgets on silent mode. And if you can afford to turn them off, please do so. It's okay to talk, no? We are not in a prayer meeting, so you can react while listening. But please remember that your sounds should contribute productively to the soundscape, no? So just an outline of the Listening Tambayan. We have 3 listening playlists, and then after that, we have a roundtable discussion. But if you want to react or comment or ask, just let us know so we can direct you to our guests. And then try to avoid distractions and be immersed in the sounds around you. So without further ado, let's go to the listening. Yeah, I'm excited. Excited na ba kayo? Parang hindi naman. Ano ba yan? So today, our first guest is from the DOT ASMR. So maybe you can introduce yourselves, guys. Just 1 to 2 sentences before I read your introduction.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Howie Uyking, and due to recent events, I have to say that I am here on private capacity, and I do not represent any entities or any institutions, past or present. Now, with that out of the way, I'm honored to be invited here and to be alongside such brilliant and talented artists of sound, because my background is in marketing, and I used to handle the country's branding of the DOT during Secretary Berna Romulo Puyat's time. And right now, I still continue to promote the Philippines as I'm now with Philippine Airlines. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Next, Erwin, Sir Erwin.
Well, I'm Ditto, Howie Uyking. I'm Erwin Romulo. I work in film, music, and sound and art. And I'm not affiliated with anyone.
Okay, thank you for that short but very meaningful introduction. Maraming meaning yun. Oh, anyway, so let's move on to the description. I'll just read the description here. The ASMR series for the Philippine Department of Tourism was produced during the pandemic lockdown, specifically in 2021 and 2022. The tourism sector was one of the most affected by the COVID crisis. At the time, no foreign tourists were allowed to visit the country. Domestic travel was limited, and there was no clear indication when it would go back to normal. Wow, such a distant time. So anyway, the branding office led by former Assistant Secretary Howard, how do I say it, Uyking? Yeah, Uyking, looked for alternative ways to showcase the country online. It was important to sustain the production of content promoting Philippine tourism, even though travel to and within the country was limited. At the time, no one knew when things would go back to normal, but everyone believed that the pandemic would end someday. Someday. The project aimed to give those yearning for travel something to look forward to when border restrictions would finally be lifted. It sprang from the insight that when we travel, we go sightseeing, but it is with our ears that we hear and sense things all around us. Given the popularity and prevalence of ASMR content on YouTube, it sounded like a good idea to make a series of videos highlighting not just the sights, but the natural sounds from different locations in the Philippines, particularly from spots not as well known abroad. So, can you walk us through your process, how you made this video, how you selected the not so known places? Ikaw daw.
Now, maybe I can start with the conceptualization of the project. At that time, international travel wasn't allowed, and domestic travel was very restricted, with most of the destinations not open to the public, of course, to contain the virus. But at that time, we also thought it was important that we maintain the relevance of Philippine tourism, even though when it's closed, because we believe that when the pandemic would end, we hope that the Philippines would still be one of the first destinations that people would look forward to visiting once borders would be lifted. And so we thought of a lot of we produced a lot of content featuring a lot of our destinations during, what's it like during the pandemic time, its current state. And luckily, I got to work with Erwin to really show all our viewers how it's like in its most natural state. So maybe Erwin can discuss more.
Okay, so the choices were basically, we just went to Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, and we did ask around the regional directors which were the spots that they were most proud of, that they would want to be highlighted, not that weren't usually frequented by tourists. So like Ilocos, we went up to Barlig instead of Sagada, and then we went to Samar, northern Samar, not eastern Samar. And then we went all the way in Mindanao. We went to several places, not Lake Cebu only, but up to Alamada in South Cotabato. Well, the only thing is, I really actually like this kind of content because there's no annoying vloggers nor music. And so it's just, we had an ambisonic mic, and that's basically, that was the chief characteristic of the videos. They are in a binaural mix, so they can be enjoyed without them, but they can also be enjoyed best with headphones. Something Mr. Kannenberg would probably more appreciate.
Because he's in headphones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's travel to the good places that we haven't seen. Okay, so maybe we can listen to the track number 1, DOT. Okay, thank you for sharing that short version of the Philippines with us. No, so they can find the whole playlist where on YouTube, right? And then, can you tell us about the playlist? Like, what are the things they can expect when they listen to the playlist?
Okay, thanks. You can find the whole playlist and the Tourism Philippines account in YouTube. The playlist is called ASMR Series, The Philippines Experience, and there's hours and hours of 21 videos spanning across Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. So each video can range from 30 minutes to up to 4 hours. So it really depends on where you want to go. Anyway, everything is very, we captured it as it, in its purest form. So that's the goal, to be transported to that place during that time.
Thank you. How about the edited version? Can you tell us which places those were?
Yes. So this current mix that we just listened to only features a few of the places that we went to, particularly Pagudpud in Pagudpud, Mount Amuyao in the Mountain Province, Camiguin, so White Island in Camiguin, and Biri Island in Northern Samar. So we just picked from those locations.
Okay, thank you. I think some of those are not some. I mean, I think most of those in the playlist are not very accessible, right, to
Yeah.
most tourists. Can you tell us about what do you think the impact of this project might be?
Well, for one, I think it's a good document of those spots. So I think even 10 years from now, it would be interesting to revisit the playlist and see if what kind of. It's a document of a particular period in time. The big advantage we took advantage of the fact that there was no tourism, so we wouldn't be able to capture a place, record them without much human noise. That said, videoke exists all over the Philippines. So a lot of the videos had to be a little bit edited to take out a lot of my way renditions, among others.
Okay, so thank you for sharing that with us, the playlist and your thoughts. So maybe we'll go back to you guys later. But for now, we'll head on to our next guest, all the way from Portsmouth. Hi, Dr. John Kannenberg. Hello, he's saying hi. Okay, so
Hello.
I'll just read your bio for a bit. Okay, so Dr. John Kannenberg, BFA, MFA, PhD, is an artistic researcher whose current work investigates sounds as museological objects. Via an acoustemological approach, he considers the histories and cultures surrounding sounds, the technologies that generate or record them, and the auditors who hear or listen to them. His primary research platform is the Museum of Portable Sound, an experimental institution whose permanent collection of sounds explores questions related to sonic cultures, museology, digital heritage, media archaeology, and the visual culture of sound. In his current role as director and chief curator of Museum of Portable Sound, John leads an institution that exists on a single mobile phone dedicated to the collection, curation, and display of sounds as objects of cultural heritage, while critiquing conventional museum practices and music industry-imposed limitations on digital distribution of sound recordings. MOPS also maintains an extensive research library, video gallery, and physical objects collection. So you can head on to his website, johncannenberg.com, for more information. So once again, hi, Dr. John Kannenberg.
Hello.
Woo. Okay, so before we start your listening playlist, maybe you can give us like 3 reminders or 3 things to look out for in your video playlist.
Sure. The playlist that I put together is it's actually a short guided tour of the Museum of Portable Sound. So the galleries in the museum are filled with sounds, sound recordings. And I also have a physical objects collection. Sorry, wrong direction. From which some of the sounds are drawn as well. And hopefully the video will do a better job explaining what the museum is and why it was founded than I can do in just a couple of sentences.
Okay, thank you so much. So, without further ado, let's go to your video. Thanks.
Okay. Hi, I'm John, Director and Chief Curator of the Museum of Portable Sound, and I'm here today to give you a guided tour. Before we go on the tour, I'm just going to briefly introduce you to the museum, what it is, how it works, and why I started it. And then hopefully at the end we'll have time for a good discussion. And before we get started, I just want to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in the Listening Tambayan. Okay, let's get started. So you're probably wondering what the Museum of Portable Sound actually is. It's been operating since 2015. It is a curated collection of sounds on one iPhone 4S. This one, and only this one. The museum sounds are only available on this one iPhone. There's no app to download. You can't go to a website to listen to these sounds. You can only hear them by listening to this phone. Our mission statement says that we're dedicated to collecting, exhibiting, preserving, and researching primarily non-musical sounds as museum objects. So what's in the Museum of Portable Sound? Well, I've been making field recordings myself for over 2 decades, and it took me almost that long to realize that the sounds belong in a museum. And this was a result of me thinking about how sound is normally encountered in a museum. Like this, supplemental material for something that you're looking at. And it got me thinking, well, what if the act of listening was the museum itself? The way people visit the museum is they contact me, we arrange a time and place to meet. When that time comes, I give them the phone, a map of the museum, and this guidebook, which is about 300 pages long and contains all of the pictures and object labels that you'd normally see on the walls in a more typical museum. And then we sit there while they listen to my phone. Usually we end up talking a lot about sound, museums, and listening in general. And since the pandemic, I've also started offering these visits online through Zoom, which has been great because now people from all over the world have been able to visit the museum. To give you a better idea of what's actually inside the phone, here's a close-up view of the map. What you're seeing here are the 4 floors of the museum, and each floor has a primary theme. So we've got natural history, science and technology, architecture and urban design, and art and culture. These are all typical categories that museums have used throughout history to categorize the world. So now, let's actually enter the Museum of Portable Sound. Here we are on the first floor, Natural History, and this first sound that I want to play for you is a sound that's called Sitherism. You may or may not already know what that word means. I'll start to play the sound, and after a little while, I'll change the video so that you can see a definition of the word. So feel free to use the word Sitherism the next time you're out for a walk with friends or family, and you'll be able to impress them with your wide vocabulary. Next, we're in the Mammals Gallery, and this is the sound of me falling off of a camel next to the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. Now, because I'm falling onto sand, you won't really hear a thump, but you will hear the camel get kind of annoyed with me.
Okay. So you want to come down here, any sense here?
Oh, so I could get off and walk around?
Yes, but you're not going to go very near.
Right. Okay, yes, please.
Yes, perfect. Just be over here.
Thank you. Thank you.
We can be here doing a couple of pictures.
This next sound is from our Underwater Life Gallery. This was recorded by a woman named Dr. Leah Barkley, who is an expert in underwater life sounds and bioacoustics. This is a sound that she recorded in Brazil in 2011, and it's the sound of a pink river dolphin. Okay, so here we are on the second floor. This is the Science and Technology wing. We're in Gallery 7, which is called A Brief History of Sound Recording. And the sound I'm going to play for you next is the first ever recording of a human voice. And it's probably not going to be the one you're expecting. History books usually record Thomas Edison as the inventor of audio recording, but actually it wasn't him at all. And it didn't happen in 1877. It happened back in 1860. Edward Léon Scott de Martinville was a typographer, graphic designer, and magazine editor who worked in Paris. An article that he was working on about the development of photography inspired him to think about whether or not it was possible to make something similar based on the anatomy of the human ear. He convinced a few friends to help him, and within a few years, he had invented a device that he called the phonautograph. It looks fairly similar to the early phonograph that was invented by Edison. You've got a large cone attached to a needle at the small end of it. So sound would be generated outside the wide end of the cone, and that would make the needle vibrate, and it would etch into a piece of paper. Now, Leon Scott didn't think that anyone would ever be able to play back his recordings. He was convinced that he could develop a written language based on what sound looks like, that people could read and hear sounds in their head, just like we read letters and other symbols and hear words in our heads. Well, that still hasn't happened. But in 2008, a man named Patrick Feaster in the United States figured out how to take this, the recording that you're going to hear, and digitize it so that we could actually hear the original sound in it. Because if you look at this recording up close, you see the actual sound waves that were captured. What you're going to hear is a terrible recording. But it's the first. And what you'll hear is the sound of Leon Scott himself humming or singing a tune. You may or may not be able to recognize it, but I'll play you the sound, and then afterwards I'll reveal what it is. So what you just heard is the sound of Leon Scott humming Au clair de la lune. By this point in history, it was already a very old traditional French folk song. Moving on, this is the sound of a computer program on a standard cassette tape. The floppy disk hadn't been invented yet, so the easiest way to distribute software was actually audio recordings of the binary data. This particular cassette was given away with every ZX Spectrum computer here in the UK. Well, when I got this cassette, I had no idea of the great thing that I would actually find on it. I managed to locate the code for the Game of Life, and that's what you'll hear in this portion of this waveform. But at the very end of that game, you'll hear the original owner of this cassette accidentally starting to tape over his software. Now we've moved to Gallery 11, audio interfaces. And I just want to play for you two examples of something that I've collected a lot of different variations of around the world. These are the beeps or clicks that you hear in a lot of cities to help cross the street safely. And this first one I recorded in Aarhus, Denmark. Now, to compare to that recording, I'm going to play you a sound that I recorded in Dublin, Ireland. And recently I did an online visit with two blind people. And as soon as I said the next one was going to be Dublin, one of the visitors said, "Oh my God, I love the one in Dublin." See what you think of it. These street crossing signals are really good examples of sound marks, sounds that give communities their acoustic identity. And this is a term that was popularized by the Canadian composer R. Murray Schafer in the 1970s. We're now on the third floor. This is the Architecture and Urban Design floor. We're in Gallery 17, Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling. And what you're about to hear is Sigmund Freud's toilet from his home in Vienna, which is now a house museum. And before I play this, I want you to know that I didn't do anything to manipulate how this waveform looks. This is what this sound looks like as a waveform. So if you're thinking anything rude right now, that's your own neuroses. Okay, one last architecture sound. This is Gallery 21, which is dedicated to railway stations. And this is the sound of a Solari board at Gare du Nord train station in Paris from way back in 2005. If you're not familiar with the term Solari board, it refers to these old signs that were used to display arrivals and departures in train stations and airports that were actually mechanical, not digital. So every time new information had to be updated, the letters and numbers in the signs would have to physically move in order to display the right information.
Mesdames et messieurs, votre attention s'il vous plaît. Nous vous rappelons que la mendicité est la...
Okay, we've reached floor 4, the final floor of the museum, dedicated to art and culture. We're now in Gallery 27 on the 4th floor, and this is a gallery called Rituals and Events. And this next sound is one of my favorites in the museum. It's something that I recorded completely accidentally. I was on holiday in San Francisco, and I honestly had no idea when I booked the holiday that I would be there for the Pride Parade. And it just so happens that 2008 was the year that California voted to legalize gay marriage. So what you're going to hear in this sound is not just this lesbian marching band, but you're going to hear the roar of a crowd that's incredibly happy. It's one of the few recordings that I think I've ever made of just pure human joy. The last sound I want to play was donated to the museum by my friend João Caldas, who is an artist born and raised in Lisbon, Portugal. When he gave it to me, he told me that this was the sound that makes him know that he's home every time he hears it. It's a sound made by men, they're usually always men, that are called amoladores, who ride around Lisbon on bicycles that can be converted into a traveling workbench. They use this workbench to do things like repair umbrellas and sharpen people's knives. And when they arrive in a neighborhood, to let everyone know that they're there and available for work, every amolador plays the same sequence of notes on one of these little plastic whistles. So this may not sound remarkable at all to you. When I was giving a tour of the museum once to a group of architects, one of the architects was a woman born and raised in Lisbon, and she hadn't been back in years. And as soon as she heard this sound, she started crying. It sounds like this that can be so incredibly important to people that I'm really interested in collecting and preserving. Finally today, I'd like to show you a sound made by one of the items in my museum's physical objects collection. This is it. It's a little plastic whistle. This might be pretty loud, so get ready. So this little Cap'n Crunch bosun whistle. They're toys that were given away for free in breakfast cereal in the United States in the late 1960s. It turns out that these whistles produce a 2600 hertz tone. And that tone just so happened to be used by AT&T, the United States telephone company at the time, to mark unused long-distance telephone lines. A young man named John Draper figured out that if you took one of these whistles to any pay telephone booth in the United States at the time and blew it into the receiver, you could make a free telephone call to anywhere in the world. This practice became known as phone phreaking, and it's considered the world's first computer hack. Phone phreaking was a very underground practice until October of 1971, when the US men's magazine Esquire published this article, Secrets of the Little Blue Box, which talked about a device that could generate every tone used by AT&T's telephone system. And the frequencies of these tones were published in publicly accessible reference books that you could find in specialist university libraries. One person who read this article was a young man named Steve Wozniak. Wozniak became completely obsessed with this article. He said, "It was the most amazing article I'd ever read. I just kept reading it over and over." He was so obsessed with it that he told his friend Steve Jobs about it, who was only 17 years old at the time. Jobs said to Wozniak, "We could probably sell these things to college kids for about $170. Wozniak claims that Jobs had that specific price in mind as soon as he told him about the little blue box. So that's what they did. They started a business selling little blue boxes that Wozniak built. This was the very first business that these two men collaborated on, and it developed into a partnership that birthed Apple Computer. So if not for these little whistles, we never would have had the iPod or the iPhone or any of the technology that Apple's developed. So that's the end of the tour. Thank you so much for listening. And if you've got any questions, I'd love to answer them for you right now.
Hi, John. Thank you for sharing that with us. I was really immersed in the guided tour. So maybe we can take in one question if you have, guys, because he said he would love to answer it. Yes, please introduce yourself.
Hello. I'm Mika Ravenna. Thank you for that guided tour, sir. It was a wonderful experience. I was, like ma'am, really immersed in it. I would just like to ask, since the museum is just in one iPhone 4S, how would it be possible for it to reach other people? And especially with how fast technology is moving, what would happen if how would we continue the preservation and the collection of the sounds if the iPhone 4S is to be broken? Are there any ways, or are there contingencies or backup plans? Because the collection is so wonderfully curated, and it would be such a great loss to lose it if something happened to the iPhone. So yeah, that would be my question, po.
Well, thank you very much. Let's see. In terms of your first question about how the collection is able to reach other people, like I showed in the video, people do meet me in person, but also I do have the online visits that I do where I play sounds from the phone over Zoom, like I'm doing right now. And since I started doing that, I've been able to reach more people than ever before. And I've recently I've finally crossed 2,000 visitors to the museum after having done it for a little over 7 years. So that's gotten better and better, especially since I started doing the online visits. In terms of a backup plan, in case the phone breaks, I don't have a specific device in mind, but don't tell anybody. I do have backup copies of the sounds, but I try not to publicize that. So please just keep that under the table. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. So we'll take in other questions later, because we'll go on to our third guest. So our third guest for today is Robin Rivera. Robin Daniel Z. Rivera is a professor at the Department of Art Studies, College of Arts and Letters, University of the Philippines, Diliman. He holds an AB in Broadcast Communication from UP Diliman, an MA in Communications from Ateneo de Manila University, and a PhD in Philippine Studies from UP Diliman. He is a performing musician, composer, field recordist, sound designer, sound engineer, and record producer. He has produced several recordings. Well, not several. He has produced a lot of recordings for the UP Cherubim and Seraphim, Elena Merano, UP Contragapi, the Eraserheads, Dong Abay, Sugar Free, Periodico, and Bullet Dumas. He has also staged sound installations for the UP Vargas Museum and Calirite. So, good afternoon, Doc Robin.
Hello.
Yan. So, before we start your playlist, can you give us like 3 things to take in mind or to observe?
Well, like the previous guest mentioned, when you do field recordings or no, in a soundscape, no, the field of acoustic communication defines the soundscape not just as the sounds in an area, but how they are interpreted by people. No? So this is the soundscape. It's not just the sounds. It's how you, the listener, interprets them or perceives them. That's one thing. Another type of sound, which was also mentioned previously, are what called sound marks. These are sounds that are unique to a specific soundscape or a specific sound area. And you're going to hear some in the ones that I brought with me. The third thing I mentioned is that another type of sound is what's called a keynote. A keynote is a continuous sound in a soundscape. Now, this is usually the sound that it's there, but you don't notice it. You hear it, but you often don't listen to it. No? So many times we go to the beach and, for example, we go to the beach and the surf is coming in and, you're not listening to it, but it's there. No? But the minute you leave, you're away from it. No? So these are what we call keynotes. And keynotes are very important, not just, to us sound, how should we say, there's a name for people like us, sound hunters. It's also important to everyone because it also helps us, in addition to sound marks, identify where we are. Okay, you might have seen mga detective crime shows, and they say, "Oh, it sounds like you're near a railroad track," and they know where, that sort of thing. So these are the kinds of sounds you hear in our environment. No, there are others, no. But these are some of the most important ones. And the ones that I'm featuring today, you'll hear a combination of all of these. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for those three things. So keep those in mind, guys. So for our first track is UP Diliman graduation 2013. So can you tell us about it?
Yes. Back in 2013, after I had finished my PhD, I started a project to record the soundscapes of UP Diliman. I grew up here. I'm a university brat. So I remember what the sounds were like back in the 1960s. No, and the sound of the campus is very different from right now. So I said, okay, I have to capture the sounds of today. That was 2013. One of the types of things that I captured first was public events. So I recorded the entire graduation ceremony held here at the amphitheater from the window of my office in the old faculty center, about 500 meters away. So you're going to hear all sorts of things. You're going to hear the birds, because my office is on the second floor. It's on tree level. So you're going to hear birds. You're going to also hear people who were milled around in front of the faculty center. People who couldn't fit inside the amphitheater. And then you're going to hear, now this particular portion was at the end. It starts with people singing UP Namin Mahal, which is the university song. And this is the end of the graduation. And so everyone is, just raring and so excited. And at the very end, everyone just explodes. And you're going to hear that moment that everyone is really just going crazy and so happy that they're finally graduates of UP. So this is it. Okay.
Yes, excited na sila, oh.
Yeah,
Graduate.
you'll get there soon. You'll
Yeah.
also hear the university band, and you'll also hear the carillon, which is the sound mark of the UP Diliman campus. No. Now the second one, it was just a normal day. I think it was a Sunday. I came to UP again on the window of my second floor office. I just wanted to do some random recording. And on that day, it turns out there was a Quezon City Marathon running through Commonwealth Avenue. And at the same time, there was a helicopter. There was a Bell Huey helicopter, which is mostly used by the military. So it was circling the area of Quezon Memorial Circle all the way to the UP campus. No? And if you grew up here on campus, you will remember that these military helicopters were circling around the campus, especially often during martial law, during the martial law period. And so I remember during the very eventful barricada, no, students from the campus were actually firing quitties or skyrockets at those helicopters. So to me, it's always the Bell Huey has always been the sign of military surveillance and oppression. Okay, and then during the second pass, because the helicopter was circling on the second pass, I suddenly noticed that the carillon, the sound mark, started playing a song, and that song was Bayan Ko. So you had this representation of this oppressive, regime, and then at the same time you had the rallying cry of most of the anti-government, most who felt the anti-government, anti-authoritarian movement, no, of which there were many, many, very different groups, no. But again, a lot of the anti-government, anti-authoritarian group was in UP Diliman. Staunch anti-authoritarianism among UP Diliman. So you will hear these two, and I remember I was listening over headphones when I was recording this, and my hair was standing, and I just knew that oh boy, people who grew up at this in the 1970s here in UP Diliman will know this, will automatically make the connection between these two sounds. So this is a helicopter Bayan Ko. Okay. So that's helicopter bayan ko. Now, this last one naman, medyo is a little lighter. It's actually dance music. In my, for fun, I like to make EDM. I produce EDM. So I was doing this one piece, and I was figuring out, okay, what am I going to do differently this time? For the rhythm sections, I usually dispense with the regular 4 on the floor, hand claps on the 2 and 4 type rhythm. And I try to simulate kulintang on some rhythms. So for example, I substitute not gangs, the agong with the bass drum. Then I substitute the babandil with cymbal bell, and then I substitute the dabakan with a snare drum hitting 16th notes. Okay, so I usually do that in all my EDMs nowadays. And then, so I was doing this one track, and then I was thinking, okay, what am I going to do for the melody? But then I said, why do I have to put a melody in the first place? No. So what I did was, okay, what do I miss most? What did I miss most in the pandemic? One of the things I missed most was the sound of people, actually. The sound of people having a good time and having fun. So I dug into my collection of soundscape recordings, and then I chose 2. One of them was a recording of pre-pandemic of our village swimming pool. So a lot of children and adults having fun. Yeah. So I put that on the first part. And on the second part, I got the sounds of a palenque. This is actually Nepacu Mart here in Cubao at 5 o'clock in the morning. So, this is the wet market portion, so people are usually chopping things and, calling customers to come, communicating, that sort of thing. I don't know how many of you probably noticed it, but I personally missed the sounds of people, of other people. So this piece, and so I entitled this, a dance for the, what was the name?
For the new, but not quite normal summer.
Yeah, because that was summer when most of the restrictions were being lifted, summer of 2022. Okay, so if you want to tap your toes, go ahead. This is it.
I kind of hear the rhythms of the agong because I also I played before, so I can imagine how it fitted in the music, and it's very interesting. So next time na punta tayo ng bar, guys, ito na EDM natin. Woo! Ayan, so that's going to be our new jam. Yung feeling bata, joke. Anyway, so thank you for sharing your recordings with us, Dr. John, DOT team, and Dr. Robin. Okay, so for today, I'll do the first question. No? So since we're dealing with recordings, what would be your what is your criteria for selecting a reliable device or gadget in recording? So maybe 3 standards or 3 criteria. So we can start with John, Dr. John.
Probably the first standard that I have is, can I afford it?
Well, that's my standard, only standard.
Yeah, that's about as far as I go. I'm not an audiophile. I don't need the best or the highest fidelity. I don't believe in it because especially now that I'm of a certain age, it's a scientific fact that your hearing degrades as you get older. So if I were to try to make perfect recordings, so-called, I wouldn't be able to hear them. So I don't see that as a need, especially for what I do, which is based on trying to record events rather than effects or music.
Thank you. So our guests over here, can you also answer, especially the okay.
It's also the basic of the project, the economics of it, but I'm good with recording on an iPhone.
On iPhone, okay.
Yeah.
How about same? Pass, okay. Doc Robin.
Well, in my case, I guess I'd call myself a control freak. Because whatever device I use, I should be able to have control over the device. So like, if I use an iPhone or something like this, because the tendency of the iPhone is that everything's automatic. But if I use a phone, I'd have to download an app that would allow me to fix the recording levels, for example. So I've used all sorts of things. I've used phones, I've used mini disc players, I've used portable digital, the things that they use for dictation. Yeah, I've used that too. I've used a full setup with a couple of small diaphragm condenser mics. I've used everything that's possible, but in most cases, I like to have some kind of control over it, over the level, because the problem with our ears adjust differently to machines. So I want to be able to get it so that it approximates the characteristics of our ears.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your tips. Oh, guys, listen na. And then next, maybe in terms of recording, you have your criteria of what to record, right? How about criteria of what not to record? So the things you exclude from the recording.
No such thing. Anything that makes sound, anything that makes sound is potentially material, because we hear everything, We don't necessarily listen to everything, because hearing and listening are two different things. But we can hear everything. We can't shut our ears off. Even if you plug your ears, you can't completely shut it off. So all these sounds are out there, and they're all material.
Okay, how about you guys? How about John? Back to you.
Yeah, I don't really have anything that I would flat out refuse to record. I don't know. I have to say I've never made a concert bootleg.
How about
That's it.
how did you curate your museum? Like, what kind of Doc Dayang is looking at it. Do you have a short answer for it? Not long.
Curatorially, that's the shortest I can say. The long answer is I proposed making the museum or proposed doing an event for the museum before the museum existed, and amazingly the proposal was accepted. So I had 2 weeks to make a museum. And so the first version of the museum was solely field recordings that I had made myself. And I just had these 4 categories that I came up with, and I plugged in things from my collection into those. And then the museum has moved on from there.
Okay. Thank you for that. How about our... Oh, he wants to answer. Okay.
In one of our recordings, when they submitted the first draft, I wanted to remove the sound of the fly because I thought at that time it would interfere with the natural sounds. But of course, in the end, it was supposed to be considered as part of the natural sounds. But I took it out anyway. But it's a good thing that Erwin plugged it back in during his record.
Okay, so how about... Thank you.
Just to give a context about that
Okay.
fly, since we've talked about them already.
Okay.
So it was taken in Mount Amuyao, which takes 6 hours to hike up to. It is one of the it is the most challenging climb in the Cordilleras. I found that out after doing it by Google search. But when we got there, I was telling Sir Robin right before we started, when we got to the peak of the mountain, there was no sound, as in zero. I mean, so we had to go we had to descend and plant mics and just pray that we caught anything. So when we listened to the takes back in Manila, we did hear nice birds and this one insistent fly.
Good thing you didn't remove it. Okay, how about our audience here? Do you have like questions? I'm sure you have, right? Okay, do you have a mic there? Thank you.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name's Leah. I'm one of the broadcast students here at the university. Actually, a lot of my questions were kind of already answered during Miss Pat's question and answer portion, but I do want to kind of address Doc John because I was particularly moved by the portable museum, and I didn't expect that I'd be saying that. So I have a lot of realizations, comments. What I really liked about it is, first of all, it challenges the normal conventions and standards of what we think a museum should be. Because basically, this is a museum in an iPhone, which I never thought I'd be saying, but it exists. And I didn't know what I was going to hear, but I didn't know until today that I needed to hear a guy falling off a camel until it actually happened. So what I realized is the beauty of this sort of museum is that you're transported to experiences that you're not usually, well, in our lifetime, not all of us are going to be fortunate to experience these experiences. So I think that it's really wonderful that we were able to experience that, even though I don't know if I'm ever going to go to Egypt or Paris or anything like that. So that was nice. And it feels like it's a very personal experience as well to the people who were experiencing the sound. And I wanted to point out particularly the Pride Parade, because as a queer woman living in the Philippines, you know, that was, I don't know if in my lifetime it's something that we're going to see the legalization of gay same-sex union, just to stay on the safe side. But hearing that pure joy and human emotion just really moved me to tears. So, Doc John, thank you for that experience.
Wow. Thank you. Really. I mean, that's the whole reason why I included that sound in the museum in the first place. It's people started asking me what my favorite sound was in the museum, and I really don't have one individual one, but I kept having to decide, and all I can decide is a tie between me falling off the camel and the Pride Parade. And it basically, I see two sides to this project. One is ridiculous and absurdist, and the other one is trying to cut to the heart of the human experience. And the Pride Parade one for me is that. I mean, like every time I hear that crowd, the few hairs that I still have on the back of my neck stand up. And to know that you were so moved by it, that makes everything that I've ever tried to do with the museum worthwhile, and all the difficulties that I've had trying to do it. That makes it worthwhile.
Thank you. How about other members of the audience? Do you have more comments or questions? Yeah, go ahead, please.
So, hello. My name is Nat. My question is also for Sir John. Since it seems like it's a collection of your recordings of your lived experiences, or siguro, maybe from your community, sorry. How has your progress been in recording throughout the years? Like, what changes do you think you'd say you had in choosing or curating what recordings you have? And are you planning on expanding, let's say, to like colleagues, or are you strictly like, these are recordings specifically that you have or you yourself recorded?
That was my, well, like I mentioned, when I first put it together, that was kind of the only option I had because I had so little time. Over the years, I've been able to add more and more sounds by other people. I think the first two sounds that were donated to the museum, one was from the British Library's sound archive, and it's a very old, professionally produced record. It's the earliest recording of birdsong that was ever sold to the public as a record. And that just kind of blew my mind that they decided they wanted to donate that. And then the second one was from a colleague of mine, who is an Egyptian artist, and he and I were talking about the museum, and he happened to mention that I was talking to him about protest sounds, because I've started collecting sounds of protests, and he mentioned that he happened to be present the moment that Hosni Mubarak stepped down from power in Egypt. He was in Alexandria. He wasn't in Cairo. But he said he had a recording of the very moment that it was announced. And so I begged him to donate it, because having lived in Egypt for a little while, everything that happened was with the Egyptian revolution was really important to me, and I thought important for the world. And so this colleague of mine, his name is Khaled Kadal. he donated this recording, and since then I've asked people specific sounds that I haven't been able to make, or specific recordings I haven't been able to make. But I try to keep it. The trend with many sound projects is to crowdsource them, because everyone has a microphone with them now. And because I wanted this to stay true to the limitations that museums place on themselves, I didn't want to crowdsource this, even though many museums are now crowdsourcing things. But I wanted to stay away from the trend of crowdsourcing for sound projects in particular. And I think that has helped it, because it's already, I only have 325 sounds in it right now, and it's completely overwhelming to every visitor. They never know where to start. So there's a lot of reasons why I've done it this way. One of them is simply to keep it from being too overwhelming for the visitor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think our guests also have questions for each other.
Well, I have a question for Sir Robin.
Oh, okay.
Sir Robin, I was also moved by the recording of the helicopter in Bayan ko, and you got that by accident, right?
Yeah.
By chance.
It was just, it's like, I felt like a photographer. No? Kasi di ba in photography, sometimes, you plan your shots and all of this. But sometimes when you're out there with nothing in mind, you're just waiting, di ba? Like people who do bird photography, nature photography, you're just waiting. Yeah. So when I did that, I was just basically, it was just a day, I said, okay, I'm just going to capture whatever there is. So you just turn on the recorder and this happened, never expecting it. But when I was hearing it, it was like, oh, wow. This is, I gotta thank heavens I was here on that day at that exact time to capture this.
So how do you reconcile that with your having to control and your other feature as a producer? Your other. What's more fulfilling? I guess that's really my question. If you capture something by chance, or if you create it?
Again, it's that when you say create it, no. Again, I go back to the definition of soundscapes. No, it's how you understand the sound that's going on around you. No, so that was my of that specific set of sounds. That was how I understood it. No, this is how I interpreted it. This is how I interpreted the sound of the helicopter. This is how I interpreted the sound of the carillon going at the same time. So, again, it's like in any art form, diba? It all depends on your interpretation. No? So how do you interact with? It's just that in this case, it's sound and it's going on, and I don't have any control over what's happening in the soundscape, but I have control over how I captured it. No, so I remember I have actually several versions of this. I have a version in which, because there's a practice in soundscape recording that they pass it through a high-pass filter, because a lot of there's a lot of rumble actually in the keynote. No, if you use a normal mic, which does not, normal mics don't hear the same way that our ears do. So if you stick a mic, it's going to hear a lot. It does not discriminate, unlike your ears, which do. So many times I'm tempted to attach to put it through a high-pass filter, so filter everything below 100 hertz. But then there are some things that there are some parts in that recording that had material below 100 hertz. So I have to hear that too. So, so do I filter it so that it doesn't sound so irritating, or do I leave it in because that's the way it was? No. So I actually have a lot of versions of that. I have a high-pass version of that. I have a low-pass version of that. It's all with me, but in the end, usually I end up doing the unequalized recording, no, and which I had control over, at least, no. So I tried to make it so that it would not overload on the recording, and when we were doing the practice, I try and make it so that it doesn't overload during the playback too, no. Because the tendency of a lot of nature sounds is that it comes out as noise. It comes out as white noise. This is exactly what it is. No? It's a lot of noise. No? And usually when you put it through a playback device, depending on how you set it up, will introduce its own set of noises too. So you kind of have to control that too. No? So okay, put down the level a bit because it's distorting. Put up the level a bit so that it doesn't, so that you can hear the power, that sort of thing. So that's where the control part comes in. But as for controlling what's in the soundscape, nah, you just let it play. It just does its thing, and you're there trying to capture it.
Thank you for that very informative answer. I think somebody here has a question. Yes, please.
Hello po, magandang hapon, good afternoon. I would like to ask, because I also ask my students to do experimental productions, and then I ask them to do sound design or the soundscape of the university, right? And they come up with these sound markers like the carillon, rally, AS, the noise of these buildings known in the campus. So, but it comes with a grander scale, the Philippines, right? For ASMR, we imagine jeepneys and all the visuals that the DOT shows us whenever they do those kinds of productions, right? But when in terms of sound, what is the sound of the Philippines? Do you also think of those kinds of things? Especially when you record, of course, you go to different places and do all of these recordings and capture the soundscape of different provinces in the Philippines. But do we really have that particular sound that is characteristically Filipino?
We experimented on sound and music mostly during the pandemic. When we started out producing our first content during that period, it was more on OPM. And after that, we realized that maybe it's not just music that would define the Philippines. Maybe it would also be sound. There's no one sound that would represent the entire country. And that's why we went to different places to record how each destination would sound like in its most natural state, without tourists, without all the other noises generated by tourism. And so, at least for me, for us, that would be the most genuine sound of that particular place in the Philippines. And of course, the natural sound in Barlig or in Saud would be different from all the other places in the country and in the world.
That said, videoke all over the Philippines, and tricycles, and unfortunately, sauce. Electric sauce. I've heard that all over. Wanted to point out, Sir Robin, you were telling me off when we were discussing that it sounds more, the Philippines may sound like a soundscape more like Indonesia rather than Malaysia.
Yeah.
So
Okay. I can't say that there is one sound, no. That's just like saying that, I remember I used to tell my students na, if you got a package from the Philippines and you sent it abroad, what would it smell like? Diba? Yeah. When my wife was studying in Japan, she said it smelled like tuyo. Smelled like salted fish. No? That's what the Philippines smells like. Unlike if you send something from the United States here to the Philippines, it sounds like, they say it sounds amoy tate. Diba? You oh yeah. It smells processed. Anyway, if you're going to say what sounds like the Philippines, it depends on the context though. No? Like, for example, here in the I did a paper once on Philippine palengke or wet markets. No? Now, for example, everyone thinks when you say palengkera, that means a woman selling in the market, that she has a loud and boisterous voice. No? But when in that recording of Nepakyu market, I noticed that in the in both the wet and the dry areas, they don't talk very loud. It's not loud, but it's a certain kind of nasal quality that that goes straight. No. It's something like this. Now, it's a little higher with a little more nasal quality to it, so that even at a long distance, it will go fast, right? But it's not loud. That, I notice, is how there are Filipino singers, if they sing Philippine songs, Philippine music, they will also sing like that, right? Now, if you're singing popular music, which is a completely different thing, no, they will sing like, they will try to sound like foreign, American, white or black singers, no, and they're very good at adapting, no. But if you have them sing Philippine songs, it has its own voice, no. So these are little clues as to what the Philippines will sound like. Like, we're not irritated by the sound of a jeepney. No? I mean, like, if, our diesel engines for their jeepney here are really, really prehistoric. You don't have these kinds of engines anymore in Japan. No? Their diesel engines are quiet. No? Our diesel engines are like that. No? And we don't mind it. We don't mind it. No? So it depends on the context also. In the rural areas, I tried to do something. I was doing a project in Batangas City. I was talking to Erwin about it. And I was telling one of our researchers from the city, I said, okay, take me to the remotest area in the city, up in the bundok, because I want to get what's called a steady state sound. And so he took me up to the, and it just so happened that when I started recording, I could hear a videoke machine. It turns out something like half a kilometer away, we were listening and we were going like, oh yeah, there's probably a wedding going to happen tomorrow. So this is the pre-wedding party. Oh God. And then tricycles, that. So, that's what you will hear. No? Anywhere you go in the Philippines, you hear tricycles, jeepneys, videoke. Because people love to sing.
Sir, yun nga iniisip ko, parang that would be a good project. Like, we have an archive of these Philippine sounds. Yeah, si Ma'am Dayang meron. Kasi when students ask me, saan po makakahanap? Where can we find all these sound effects of jeepneys, tricycles? Because they can find online other recordings. I asked them to record on your own.
Actually, yes. I remember when I was a student here in broadcasting, I used to record my own. Because we had little cassette recorders. May cassette na kami na. We had these little cassette recorders. My house was something like a block away from EDSA, no? So back in the day, let's say the 1970s, if you needed sound effects for a production like a radio or a television production, we used our sound effects records. But then many times the sound effects records have so many scratches on them, it's so obvious that it's a record. So when we were doing our pre-prod, I was going like, I don't want to use the record anymore for traffic sounds. I'm going to record my own. So I'd go out, I'd get my cassette recorder, go out into EDSA and record the traffic. And that was it. I'd bring it in and use it in my production. It's actually, it's all you just use your phone, That's why if you're looking at, in the museum, these are all just sounds that they're all there. You just have to say, oh, that sounds interesting. Turn on your recorder and record it.
Pasingit. Pasingit ako. In continuation with what Robin was saying, because a lot of people are recording sound since for a very long time, including myself. But we never had a chance. We don't have so much chance to show it to people or make people listen to it. Like the listening session isn't really something that we do. It's somewhat new. Like this is the first Tambayan that we're doing in UP. So there are new platforms where the archived sound of environment of the city or whatever are being exposed. One of them is John's Museum, Museum of Portable Sound. Last month, we also launched in Melbourne yung Garland magazine. This is edited by Gary Warner, who is our guest for the first Tambayan, and Kevin Murray. So I have an article there on jeepney sound. I had it recorded by Louis Tan, who's a student of us at the College of Music, during the close to the time when they were doing the jeepney strike, the phase out strike, because we were worried that we won't hear not the sound of the jeepney, because the artifact can be there, but riding the jeepney. That's a whole different story, right? So I did a listening article, and I'm very happy that Garland provided that platform for us. So just to promote Garland magazine, this is issue 31 to hear. So it's available online, I think, for the next 3 months. It's something that you can check out. So maybe people like us who are recording, this is the second, this is a future project for all of us to think of different platforms on how the things that we record either by our iPhones or our high-tech recorders, how can we share it to other people who are most likely going to use it either for their own creative project or whatever else, spending time not listening to whatever else. Okay? Yan. Thank you.
Can I add something to that now? This is not just a problem here in the Philippines, but for many years, for decades, it was a problem also in the United States. Now, whenever you talk about media, media production, whether it's film or video, or electronic or analog or whatever format you're looking at. One of the problems is the sound is always secondary. Video is primary. So more effort is placed on capturing video. Good video quality. You got your 4K cameras, you got your 8K cameras, You have to have a 4K screen. You have to be able to edit in 4K or 8K or whatever, so you buy this fantastic computer that could do all of this. Right, fantastic. But then what happens when, what happens, for example, in post-prod? So they'll give you 1 month. Erwin's already. Don't get Erwin started on that. They'll give you a month to edit the movie or the video, and then how much time will they give for sound design? Like 1 day, 2 days. No, I mean, like, come on, no. That's the problem, and also the technology. For example, I mean, like, okay, you go into field. I was listening to a soap opera, local soap opera, the other day. Can I name names? I can. No, now okay. I was listening to a soap opera, so I was watching a soap opera, very, very popular local soap opera. It's rather well produced. Visually, it's rather well produced, But then I noticed that in shooting in the same room, the ambience changes when it goes from one shot to the other. And I'm going like, it's either the guy doing the Foley wasn't given much time, or the entire audio post-prod wasn't given much time. This has been, again, this is not just a problem here in the Philippines. Kahit sa States, it's a problem. It started changing a little in the 1980s from what I read, no. Pero it's still a problem, no. That's why whenever I remember when I was when I was doing my sound hunting projects, and I let my friends hear it. One reaction that I get pretty often is that, oh yeah, it's the sound, so what? Yeah, no, I mean, these are from lay people, no. And I'm going like, but don't you use your ears also to detect what's going on in the world? And they said, oh, yeah, but seeing is believing. You see, that is what sound art is up against, no? The problem is that we're so concentrated on the visual, no, as the bearer of truth, that we forget that the sound is also the bearer of truth. Diba? So that's why in the past few years we have things like the anthropology of the senses, no? Because, for example, like smell, no? How can you, I mean, like, smell is such an important thing when you're talking about personal experience, right? Diba? I mean, like, the smell of your grandmother's bedroom. Oh, come on. How much more personal and how much more powerful is that, no, as a personal memory? So, it's important that when we experience the world, no, we have to open up all our senses. Like if you go to the field, like Erwin and company, my God, I can imagine, I mean, like going to places like that, and you have the wind, and you have the smell of the ocean, which is not always pleasant, by the way, right? It can be unpleasant, like to you, diba? But that's it, no? We have to start and realize that when you experience something, all your senses have to come in play, no? Not just the visual. And that's the end of my rant.
Well, it's like something we can learn from, not really a pure rant. So thank you, Sir Robin. How about? Yeah, I think we have.
I have a question for John. For Dr.
I actually had a response to Robin.
Oh, okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Is that possible first?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to agree wholeheartedly about what you said about how everyone tends to prioritize the visual as opposed to the sonic. And I think museums have a big responsibility there. Because when museums first started, they were multisensory spaces. They were places where you could pick stuff up and touch them and talk and, shake things to hear what they sounded like. But then in the 19th century, when colonialism basically took over the dominant aesthetics of the world per se, museums became these sort of tyrannical, silent, visual-only spaces, and that's why that's one of the reasons why I wanted to create this museum, because I wanted to start to try to readdress that balance between the sonic and the visual. And I'm actually involved in a research project at the University of Leicester here in the UK, where we're hoping to bring a lot of museum professionals together to try to address not just the sound-vision imbalance, but also to try to use museums as a tool to readdress that balance, because we're the ones who kind of screwed everything up in the first place. So I just wanted to add that. Sorry. Because I know museums are a huge part of that fault within society, within so-called Western society especially. And that all goes back to colonialism and white folks, and for some reason, white people like looking at things. They don't like listening to things. I don't understand.
Dr. Kannenberg, I wanted to
Yes.
ask, I know you do a program, listening in museums.
Yeah.
And part of it is doing listening exercises.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you what they were, because I'm not actually, ironically, I'm not a very good listener. I mean, maybe that's why I gravitated towards this, maybe. But that's why I wanted to know what some of the exercises you conduct during those tours or lectures.
Well, let's see. It's been a while since I've taught the class.
Just one.
I think
we wouldn't want you to give the entire tour away.
If I take students to an art museum, I'll try to stop in front of a painting or a sculpture that is depicting something that is making sound, or that's discussing sound in some way, like a painting of a tiger in a jungle, or a statue of a person blowing a horn. There's also I took students to in the Tate Modern. I took students to the Marcel Duchamp urinal and asked them to think about how that might have sounded. So I'll do that. I'll ask people to try to listen to visual objects, but also I do exercises where I ask them to sit down and make a personal sound map of the space that they're in. So I give them a sheet of paper with a X in the middle, and I ask them to map what they're hearing in relationship to that X by either drawing it or writing it. And I give them a specific amount of time. And those exercises are really, really, they produce a lot of really interesting results, depending on people's familiarity with listening in general. Because sorry, I blacked out there for a second. But anyway, those are two examples there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have more questions from the... Yes, okay, go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. I'm Trinity and I'm one of the broadcasting students here. This is just out of pure curiosity. Like, for our speakers, how did you guys get into sound in the first place, because after hearing all the recordings, it's like I found this newfound appreciation for everyday sounds, which in broadcast media we tend to like filter out because we prioritize the voices of our talents, etc., etc. But then after hearing all the recordings today, these daily sounds that we hear actually preserve or set the setting of whatever scene that we shoot or we capture, and they also preserve the memory. So I'm actually curious, like, how did you get into sound? Like, ayun lang po. Actually, yeah.
Who wants to answer first? Doc Robin?
Me first? I'm a musician. I grew up as a musician. My mother was a musician. My father... so music is all about sound. Then when I got into... Then I was in high school yata. Late in high school, I saw a book in the College of Music. It was sound recording by John Ergel. It's a classic. It's a classic book. I didn't understand 70% of the math, but I understood all of the concepts about it, and I'm going like, hey. So that made me want to be involved in recording. And then when I got to college, I was here. So media and all of this, and all this technology, all these cameras and videotape recorders and stuff like that. And that's where it all started. Because now, in music, people have the old idea of music is, di ba, yung pleasant tones versus unpleasant tones. What is pleasant is music, and what is unpleasant is noise. But then how can you have music? But then in music, you also have noise, right? You have cymbals, you have drums, you have noisy instruments in music. So music is all about sound. So it's the production of sound, the organization of sound, and all of that. Now, the soundscape is an extension of this concern for music. And I think what our other guest is talking about, and what I'm talking about, is very similar. We're coming from this is the discipline known as acoustic communication, which was spearheaded by F. Murray Schafer, right? F. Murray Schafer, who was a composer also, and who developed this idea of the soundscape, and it's a thriving, very powerful area of academic study nowadays, which if you want to explore it, I'm advertising. There's a book called Ear Cleaning. You'll find it in the College of Music. Actually, you can just Google it, called Ear Cleaning. That's the start. It's actually all the exercises for sound mapping and all of that stuff. You'll see it in that one. It's a pamphlet, and you'll see it there. If you're interested, go look for it.
As a drummer, I'd like to personally object to the characterization of drums as noise. Sorry.
Although I'm a drummer too.
Anyway, I guess I'll take a stab at this. The way I got interested in sound, it happened when I was 8 years old. I watched a TV documentary after the original Star Wars film came out in 1977. And it included a long sequence showing the sound designer of Star Wars, the man named Ben Burtt. It showed him collecting the sound of tapping a long wire connected to a water tower with a little metal hammer, and how that became the sound of every laser blast in Star Wars. And I was just completely blown away. And then I started reading everything I could about how they made Star Wars. I became obsessed with it. I started out as a visual artist. I wanted to be a storyboard illustrator. But it was Ben Burt from Star Wars who basically injected the power of sound in my brain. And then also a very famous George Lucas quote. I hate to make this all about Lucasfilm, which because it feels very sad and corporate now, but there was a time when it was simply magical. But I remember coming across a quote by George Lucas, which says, sound is at least 50% of the film experience. He said this very close to the time that the original Star Wars film came out. And it's because of him, excuse me, him and his collaborations with a few other 70s filmmakers that sound finally became elevated within the world of Hollywood filmmaking. And so I got into it through sound effects, basically.
Well, in a way, I have a similar origin to Dr. Kannenberg. My version of Ben Burt is Walter Murch, who is my favorite.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes.
So he's my favorite filmmaker among all. So people get surprised by that, but he really is. So the way he pioneered so many ways of capturing sound for films like The Godfather, Apocalypse Now, and just the way he writes and thinks about everything about filmmaking, but particularly his contributions to sound design. On a more personal level, I did mention I don't think I'm a very good listener. And I just realized that the other day talking to Dr. Araula, we were talking about listening, and I guess maybe that's the reason I kind of gravitated towards this field. So yeah, that's
Yeah. I'm not a sound guy. As I mentioned earlier, I'm in marketing, so I'm the more visual person that the three of you would hate. But I've had a newfound appreciation for sound after working with this guy. So it was our first video for the DOT back then. And I knew that when the first draft was submitted by this agency, something was off. I couldn't pinpoint what it was, but I gave it to Erwin. I asked him, what's wrong? What can we do to change it? And my surprise, he gave it back. Same visuals, but the music was changed. More ambient sounds were added, and it really made a difference. And after that, I guess it's more of a curse that I've been more discriminating when it comes to sound. Entire ads have been delayed because I wanted everything changed from music to sound. And even at the personal level, there are theaters in the country, film cinemas, that I would boycott because the sound didn't sound good anymore. And so yeah, it's not really super positive because it really ups your standard to how you experience art.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for sharing your experiences and bits of wisdom and absurdism to our young students over here. So I think we've covered a lot of our bases today, and we've listened to a lot of good stuff and some absurd stuff, but really heartwarming stuff. Yeah, so for today, we're wrapping up our Listening Tambayan episode 4. And thank you so much for staying with us. Thank you so much for lending your ears, and see you on the next episode. We're wrapping up our Tambayan, signing off.